YouTube recommended a video of a Malaysian Chinese to me. The content is: the Chinese fleet visited Malaysia, and some military academy students accompanying them wore naval uniforms and visited local Chinese schools. It is said that this incident caused a strong response in the Malay community. The angry Malays believed that this was the Chinese showing off their power and undermining Malaysia's sovereignty. I clicked on other videos on this channel and found a terrible phenomenon. There is a serious division and confrontation in the Malaysian Chinese community. Some pro-China people are even called Chinese glue. Not only can the Malays not tolerate it, but some local Chinese will also feel disgusted. To be honest, the issue of Chinese in Southeast Asia has always been a very entangled issue for Chinese netizens. From historical facts, the Nanyang Chinese love China very much. They wandered in a foreign country and made a living with difficulty. Not only did they have to face the exploitation of the colonists, but they also had to face the rejection of the locals. Life was very difficult. When China entered the full-scale war of resistance, the Nanyang Chinese not only donated money enthusiastically, but many people also returned to China to participate in the war. It can be said that the Nanyang Chinese do not owe China a penny of friendship. They have fulfilled their obligations to their ancestral country beyond their due. However, after the end of the KMT-CCP civil war, China exported revolution in Southeast Asia due to ideological issues. I will not judge right or wrong. The result is that Southeast Asian countries generally link anti-communism with anti-China. In this way, governments of various countries semi-publicly support local people to oppress Chinese people, and the Chinese government has not provided effective shelter for Chinese people in Southeast Asia. Malaysia has long had a policy of discrimination against Chinese people, and the proportion of Chinese population has dropped from nearly 37% to the current 22%. Indonesia has even had a brutal massacre of Chinese people. The Chinese government can find excuses of all kinds, but in any case, China's contribution to the Chinese in Southeast Asia is far from matching their love for China. Therefore, if all the Chinese in Southeast Asia are anti-China, mainland Chinese netizens have nothing to say. After all, politically speaking, the Chinese in Southeast Asia have their own countries, and China is already a foreign country for them. But even when China was the poorest, the Chinese in Southeast Asia would return to China with large and small packages to help their relatives in mainland China who were in financial difficulties. In Singapore, which is the most pro-American country, speaking Mandarin and inheriting Chinese culture is also something recognized by mainstream society. Today, there are still a large number of Chinese in Malaysia and Indonesia who have a high sense of identity with China. When China's economy developed rapidly, from a backward agricultural country to the world's first industrial power and economic, military, and technological power that could compete with the United States, they were proud of China's achievements. This is a very simple emotion and should not be blamed. In the hearts of Chinese people, Southeast Asian Chinese are different from Chinese in China only by nationality. When we meet a Malaysian Chinese on the street, we will not think he is a foreigner. Just like a Chinese with an American passport returns to China, everyone just thinks he is doing well. With an American passport, he is still a Chinese. This is cultural identity and has nothing to do with politics. When we see a Malay, the first reaction is, this is a foreigner. After there are more Africans in Guangzhou, Chinese netizens, who claim to be the least xenophobic and the least racist, have a lot of sour words. Extreme people even clamor for the government to send them back, regardless of whether they have a Chinese residence permit or have been naturalized. But if Guangzhou adds 300,000 Southeast Asian Chinese, everyone may not feel it at all. Because we are the same kind of people, this is not something that passports can change. Scottish Americans must hold grand parades on every festival, wearing Scottish skirts and playing Scottish bagpipes. Italian Americans have not given up Catholicism and embraced Protestantism. Canadian Indians do not hide their national customs. When Indian Prime Minister Modi visited Canada, the streets were full of Indians who welcomed him. That was not fake. If Indian warships visit Canada and bring Indian Military Academy students to visit local Indian schools, I don't think anyone will come out to blame them. So, as far as the matter itself is concerned, the Chinese fleet's visit to Malaysia was communicated with the Malaysian government, and there was no show of force. Let me say something unpleasant. With China's national strength, does it need to send warships to Malaysia to show force? Chinese people like to visit Chinese communities and Chinese schools. This is human nature. It's like a Beijinger going to Shanghai. If he doesn't visit his own relatives, does he visit his relatives' neighbors? There is nothing wrong with this matter. If it causes anger among Malays, the problem lies with the Malay community. I want to say to my Chinese friends in Malaysia that Malaysia is your political motherland. China is the root of your culture, and you are not guilty of anything as Chinese. As a Malaysian citizen, if China challenges Malaysia to a war, you have the right to fight for Malaysia. This is your duty. But there is a premise for this matter. Does this country love you or not? Is it worth fighting for? From a factual point of view, the Chinese in Malaysia live a relatively comfortable life. Malaysia is a good home. But there are indeed a lot of laws and regulations that discriminate against the Chinese in Malaysia, and the Malays also have a realistic rejection of the Chinese. As a relative, my advice is, if you do something wrong, you must admit it. If you have done nothing wrong, you cannot give in blindly in the face of unreasonable troubles. Chinese Americans often surrender when facing robbers, so American gangs often blackmail Chinese. But Korean Americans can unite and fight back against violent elements with automatic rifles, so they can get relative safety. Malaysia needs to unite all ethnic groups, but this requires the joint efforts of Malays, Chinese, and Indians, and must not be at the expense of sacrificing the interests of the Chinese and dividing the Chinese community. China's strength is a happy event for the citizens of the People's Republic of China, but why can't the Southeast Asian Chinese be happy? With today's Chinese military strength, do we still need to worry about which Southeast Asian country dares to persecute Chinese blatantly? Those who accuse China of having intentions towards Southeast Asia are completely brainless. China has no intentions towards Singapore, which is full of Chinese people. Could it have intentions towards a country as big as Malaysia? Moreover, if China really wants to invade Malaysia, does it need the help of local Chinese? Southeast Asian Chinese friends who love China, that is, Chinese glue, you don't have to feel ashamed of your identity. If you really like China, you are welcome to return to China to live. China has a large enough territory and abundant enough resources to feed us. But today's China does not need you to sacrifice your rights to help. China is already a foreign country for you politically. We hope that overseas Chinese can take care of their own lives and their families first. If you are really facing danger, with today's Chinese public opinion, they will never allow the government to stand idly by. Finally, I would like to ask a question. Is the existence of Chinese glue because the Chinese can't forget China, or because the Southeast Asian countries have never let the Chinese feel at home? Is this all the fault of the Chinese?